Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Pastor PJ Aarsvold. I'm the campus pastor here at Renewal Church in the Highlands, and it is a great joy to be with you this morning, venturing out in the cold to come gather around the warmth and the love of Jesus. And so I hope that you can feel that in here. We turned the boilers up a little bit to add effect. No, I'm just kidding. The boilers just always work hot. But we're in a sermon series here at Renewal that we're coming to a close soon. We've been going through John's letters and looking at how John talks about love. John has these very strong words about love that sometimes run contrary to the way that we think about love in the world. And so we've been zeroing in on the way that John in his letters to Christians talks about this topic. And today what we're going to be talking about is a love that is victorious, a love that wins. And in receiving that victorious love, we are free to lose. That's what we're going to be talking about today is this victorious love and our ability to then lose. I know that for many of us, we like winning, right? It's kind of like, for many of us, innate. Raise your hand if you know somebody who's like way too competitive at things. All right, if they're in this room, point to, no, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. We're not public shaming anyone. There's something about winning that we very much like, and it makes sense. There's this good feeling, this good high that comes from it. A lot of us, even as kids, right? Kids like love to win. When I was a kid, I played a lot of video games, and I got really mad whenever I would lose, even against just like the computer. I remember I had this racing like NASCAR game, and whenever I would lose, I would want to chuck the controller, and I'd tell my mom, the game cheated. She's like, how can the game cheat? I'm like, it cheated, I want to win. I was so mad. On the flip side, when we win, there's something really great that we feel. I've shared this before. I was in math league. I loved math, and I still kind of do. But when I was in 10th grade, we won our conference championship for math league. So of the 6 towns of under 3,000 people in our small rural area, we were the best math league team. And when we walked up to receive our award, I had like the most jammin' music playing in my head, like wearing my like oversized polo, like, all right, here we go. Like, we like to win. And that's not necessarily inherently wrong. It's good to have competition to push one another. But at the same time, it can get too far at times, right? We all know those people who go too far with their competitiveness. They can't afford to lose. I know somebody, when they play family game night, they just have to let one member win because it's going to ruin the night for everyone. And that person knows that they're being allowed to win, and they still don't care. They're like, yes, I'll take it. However, I want to win. So what happens is because we like to win in everything. And sometimes we try and win in conversations and arguments when we're talking to somebody who thinks differently than us. Instead of just sharing or hearing, we want to win. We want to argue with them. We like to win on a big scale. If you look at, even as Christians, the temptation to feel like we're winning when it comes to the world we live in, the culture, right? How many times do the things that the Christian church celebrates happen to be Supreme Court decisions or culture war battles, right? And I'm not saying that those things don't matter, but those typically are where we sometimes find our victory. Oh, how cool, look at the Christian church has power, we have influence, we're right, we're winning. Now, one of the really big dangers that we come up to is when we have this winning attitude that I want to win, 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 is that we are, at times in life, going to run up against objects that we on our own can never defeat. We're going to run into objects and forces that we will always lose to. So, for instance, one of those things is just the surrounding world, right? As a Christian, you will never have 100 people think that you are good, right, and holy, and correct about things. It's really easy to want to feel that way. When we have somebody who looks down upon us or the way that we see the world, we want to justify ourselves. And so we take it into our own hand to explain why we're right or to feel like we have some sort of high ground. And we want to feel like we have in some way, shape, or form won over those opinions, over those people who come up against us. Another force that we run into is our health. I think this is the time of the year where we all remember how hard it is to defeat illness and sickness and eventually death. But as far as humans, take out Jesus from the equation, death and the decay of our bodies is undefeated. And so eventually we run into it, but we want to win. And so sometimes we are prone to focus so much on every little bit of control and clinging to everything that we can do to preserve and maximize our health and our well-being and our life as much as possible. Not saying we shouldn't steward our bodies, but that can become an obsession to the point of, I don't want to lose this battle, and so I'm going to do everything in my power that's going to be my sole focus to win. And then finally, for some of us, the battle that we run into is our own sin. I don't know about you, but there are things in my life that you come up against, and at various points, you want so desperately to defeat these things that plague you and defeat you. And no matter how much you try, no matter how much you strive, there's this part of us that sometimes the own worst enemy is in us. And we stumble and we fall over and over again. And so we face all of these forces that we on our own cannot win. We like to win, and so we try and take things into our own hands. But what John is going to talk about today is a victory that comes not from us, but is instead given to us. So we're going to be looking at 1 John chapter 5 to see what this victory is. So this is starting in verse 1. Awesome. John writes this. He writes, "Everyone who believes that Jesus is the Christ has been born of God, and everyone who loves the Father loves whoever has been born of him." So if you've been following along in 1 John, this is very much in line with this letter. John talks this way all the time. This idea that anyone who believes in Jesus, believes that Jesus is the Messiah, has been born of God, and then whoever loves the Father loves those who've been born of him. So John talks about this all the time in this letter. If you love God, if you are born of him, then you're naturally going to love fellow Christians. You're naturally going to love one another. It says, "By this we know that we love the children of God, when we love God and obey his commandments." So he goes on to say, the way that we know that we love one another is that we do love God and we obey his commandments. We follow his lead. We listen to what he wants us to do. In verse 3, he says, "For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not burdensome." I love this language that John uses because he's saying that one of the ways the love of God shows in us is that we follow what God wants us to do. And he says, by the way, those commandments, they're not meant to be a burden. One of the big issues Jesus ran into in his day is that following God had become such a heavy burden upon people. People couldn't follow it. The religious leaders of the day had put up all these extra rules and laws, and it made it hard to follow God, and it made it burdensome. That's why Jesus came and said, "No, follow me. Cast your burdens upon me, for my yoke is easy. Come and find rest," right? So God's commandments are not meant to be burdens, but they're actually meant to be life-giving. And this is in doing this is the love of God. And then here's what we're really going to be zoning in here on these last two verses. "For everyone who has been born of God overcomes the world." So John says, whoever is born of God has overcome, has had victory over the world. Now notice here, he's not putting it squarely on the person, right? He's not highlighting like, look how great the person is who does this, but rather, right, you don't choose when you're born. Wouldn't that be crazy? No, it just happens to you. But this act of being born of God that is thrust upon you, that you are brought into this new life, that in itself has overcome the world. And I love it. This is the tense that this is used in is not just a past action or a future action or even a present action. It describes something that has happened that has now changed reality. So being born of God, this has happened, but now it has changed your reality. You have now overcome the world. Now, it doesn't always feel that way in life, right? Because we still have all these battles going on with the outside forces, with inside forces, with our own sin. And yet the promise from John is that being born of God, you have won. The victory is now yours. And I love this. He's going to say exactly what is this victory. And this is the victory that has overcome the world, our faith. Now this is so interesting because faith is how we receive this victory. And yet John is actually saying that the faith alone is victory. And you think about it, how crazy is it that in this broken world, when things are messed up, like just the beauty and the power of believing what God says. I feel so powerless sometimes, and God says, I am your power. It's going to be all right. I look at what's happening in the world, and I feel like we're losing at things. It's like God says, no, I've won. And there is victory in simply believing God at his word. To believe that Jesus is the Son of God, and to believe that he is Lord, and what he has said will come true and has come true. And so this victory we have is faith. When you believe Jesus Christ is the Son of God, he is the Messiah, you have victory. It's yours. That in and of itself is victory enough. Now, it comes with more victory, it comes with more things, but that alone is the basis for what John is trying to center all of this on, is the victory over the world that comes simply by believing in Jesus. That in itself is victory. He goes on to say here in this final verse we're looking at, who is it that overcomes the world except the one who believes that Jesus is the Son of God? And so what John is trying to do for us is to take ourselves out of our own victories, out of my own desire to win things, and to say, you know what, you've already been granted a victory. Somebody has already won the battle, and then you are a part of that. I think about one of the funniest things for me is whenever you see like a sports team win a championship, and there was some guy who's like signed on to the practice squad like the week before, and then he gets like the Super Bowl ring. It's like he didn't do anything, right? And yet the victory has been won, and you now get to be a part of this. Because Jesus is ultimately the one who is victorious. He's the one who came and he took everything's best shot. He took the devil's best shot, right? Jesus came down in the flesh and was tempted. People hurled insults at him. They walked away from him, right? People called him a devil himself. Jesus endured all. He endured pain. He endured being ostracized. He endured violence. He even endured death on a cross. He even endured those sins that we feel so powerless over. All of the shame and the weight of all of those things that we feel like we can never defeat, Jesus took that all upon himself in one moment and was killed on a cross and forsaken by his Father. And in that death came victory. Because 3 days later he rose from the grave, and in doing so showed that nothing can defeat him. That when the world mustered up all of its power, all of its strength, its best punch, he got back up again. Right? We recently watched Kung Fu Panda. I don't know if you've seen that movie. Love that movie. It's so good. And one of the things that I love about the main character, Po, is that his like superpower is basically that he just like keeps getting up. He's like not like some amazing, strong, buff dude, and yet when he faces like the epitome of power and evil, every time he gets whacked, he just pops back up, right? And then eventually it's in that popping back up that he's able to fight back and defeat the evil guy. But there's this beauty in that Jesus took the best punch, the devil's best punch, sin's best punch, death's best punch, and he popped up again victorious, showing that no matter what comes up against Jesus, nothing can ever defeat him. Nothing can ever win. And in believing and having faith in believing that Jesus is this Son of God, that victory is now yours. So that victory, when we feel like losers, Christ says, now you are a victor with me. Right? Not because you're so great, not because you did it on your own, but because you're part of this team, because you're part of this winning family. And so what John wants us to do is center our victory on Jesus. Not looking to win, not looking to overcome on our own, but to look to him in all things as our hope, as we sing our living hope. And so I want to just reflect a little bit then on what it looks like to live in victory instead of living for victory. Because we've already won. Jesus has said, this is already yours. You have already overcome in me. And so now you're free to go and be a loser. I should just, Renewal Church, come be a loser. Wouldn't that be awesome? I'm kind of serious about that, actually. What's beautiful is when we feel confident that we have victory, we don't feel like we need to take it for ourselves. I was thinking about Jesus' ministry, and it's fascinating how many times people scoff at him, how many times he says something, they don't believe him, and they walk away. And some people have a very negative view of Jesus, and he doesn't feel the need to try and correct everyone's opinion of him. There are times where he says something, and people say, oh, that's a hard word, that guy's crazy, and they just walk away. And he doesn't say, no, really, I'm right. You got to listen to me. Now, that doesn't mean we don't proclaim the news of Jesus in a winsome way and try and give a reason for the hope that's found in us, but we don't have to prove ourselves a winner in this world. Quite often, the world is going to look at you as a loser. And the Christian response is like, I am. I really am. And yet, it's in that losing that we're victorious. Because we don't cling to our own merits, we don't cling to how great I am, but we cling to the one who has won for us. And so this is remarkable because we live in a world that constantly tries to justify itself. People constantly trying to show the world why they are good, why they're worthy of being loved. And we just know we're already loved. We've already won. I don't feel like I need to tout myself. I can just, oh, yeah. It's one of the things we do when we have confession here in a little bit. It's basically just a confession. I'm a loser. I sin. And God forgives me. How amazing. I don't need to prove anything. And so that's one of the things. We don't need to prove this victory for ourselves. When it comes to our health and our well-being, we don't need to cling on to everything so tightly. Instead of looking at our life as something to bury or to hold, we view it as a gift to be used. Now, that's still used well and stewarded, but you think about the parable of the talents. So Jesus tells this parable about these three guys. They work for their master, and they're each given a different amount of money to use while he's away. And the one with 5 talents goes and invests it. He comes back with 10. The guy with 2 talents goes out and invests it. He comes back with 4. The guy with 1 talent is worried he's going to lose it, and so he just buries it in a hole and says, "Hey, master, don't worry, I got it. I didn't lose it." And sometimes that's like our life. We think the best thing to do is just hang on to it, rather than, how can I use this to bless others? I'm not afraid. We've won. The victory's won. Death is defeated. It's lost its sting. I'm going to be risen. And so how can I use this life to bless the people around me, to do God's will? One other thing, when it comes to sins, and maybe this is one that for some people hits home closer than others, but when there are those things that we just, no matter how hard we try, one of the dangers when we have sin is that we just want to muscle it out and beat it on our own. And if I can just pull myself together, I'm going to have the strength to do it. And how cool of a story it'll be when I get to the other side and I can tell people, like, look what I dealt with, but I handled it, didn't need any help. Thank you very much. And so when we know that we have victory over sin, it frees us to confess and to ask for help. It enables us to go before God and before one another and say, I have sinned, I am struggling, please forgive me, and then please help me. There's a 19th century painting. I had this paper for one purpose, and it's just for this name. Leopold Kupelwieser. Leopold, in the 19th century, painted this beautiful picture of the battle found in Deuteronomy when the people, or I guess it's maybe Numbers, but they're going to the Promised Land. And if you remember the story, they're doing battle with this foreign nation that's come and attacked them. And Moses, whenever his hands are up, they win the battle. And whenever his hands are down, they're losing the battle. Which, first off, I just would love to watch that play out. I don't know what that looks like exactly. Okay, we're winning. Oh, now we're losing. If he starts flapping, I don't know how the soldiers are acting. But that's just what goes through my brain when I read these stories. But Leopold painted this beautiful painting of this picture because one of the cool moments of that scene is that Moses, right, he knows all you have to do for your side to win is hold your hands up. And he can't hold his hands up on his own. He gets tired. Can you imagine, your whole people is riding on you just keeping your hands in the air, and he's like, whew, arm day was yesterday. I'm so oh, please. And so if you know that story, what ends up happening is that they bring him a chair, and then they hold his arms up for him. So Leopold painted this beautiful picture of this battle where Moses is standing there, and as long as his arms are up, they're winning. And he can't hold them up on his own. So his brother Aaron and Hur, they come alongside and they hold his hands up until the victory is won. And it's this beautiful picture that it is really easy when we're dealing with sins that plague us, when we're dealing with things that maybe, and just mental health issues, whatever it might be, things that we just feel so powerless against. We want to win on our own. And yet, like Moses, what you're going to find is you can give it your best gasp, you can give it all you got, and eventually your arms are going to get tired. But God be praised that he gave us a church to hold our arms up for us, to come alongside and say, you do not have to do this on your own, right? Because your victory is not how much you can pull yourself together by yourself. Your victory is in Jesus. So in the name of him, let's come alongside one another and help. So this beautiful picture of victory and hoisting each other to victory. You can see the battle going on in the corner there. Finally, I just want to say 2 quick examples about what this looks like. One of the dangers when we know that we have victory is that you feel like you can just tune out. God's got everything under control, so he doesn't need me. And in some ways, God doesn't need any of us. Right? He's God. He can do what he wants. And yet he chooses to include us in his plans. Right? If you've ever seen a really good team of any sort, whether it be sports or something else, sometimes when you have a really good participant or player, it's really easy for everyone else to just get back. Like if you see an NBA game and there's one shooter and it's all right, everyone just clear the floor. This one guy is just going to ISO it up and go take it to the hoop. It's really easy when you know that the victory is going to be won to just say, all right, he doesn't need me. And yet, when done well, it should actually motivate us because how cool is it when you know that in the end, Jesus wins and he has won and you get to be a part of that victory. That Jesus actually invites you to come alongside. I want you to hoist the trophy with me. I want you to receive that crown. I want you to come and strive with me. I think about Lionel Messi, if you're a soccer fan, even if you're not, you probably have heard that name, one of the greatest soccer players of all time. Well, this past year he came from European soccer and he came over to Inter Miami, which is crazy because you have one of the greatest soccer players of all time who goes to Inter Miami, who is dead last in the Major League Soccer, which is like not a great soccer league. Now, one of the cool things when Lionel Messi came was that all of a sudden these players who nobody had heard of, who were not very good, who were last place in like a lower tier league, all of a sudden turned into like whole new human beings. Like they were making plays that looked like stars. Like it wasn't like they just sat back and said, all right, Lionel, you go win us the match. All of a sudden they're like, oh, hey, I'll go run. Hey, pass it to me. And they're doing all of these crazy moves because they wanted to be part of it. It was something about his presence that gave them belief that we can actually win this. And so now I'm going to go and I'm going to strive for this victory too. It was beautiful. One other example, today, as AJ said, is Reformation Day. It's the day the church typically remembers the Reformation. I have Martin Luther socks on today, so that's fun. Those are a gift, so I thought I'd commemorate the occasion. There was a lot of people in the Reformation. It was not just Martin Luther, and there's a lot of significant moments. But one of the most profound moments to me, or one of the most powerful moments, is something called the Diet of Worms, the Diet of Worms. This is where basically Martin Luther was called to stand before the Holy Roman Emperor and give an account for what he'd done and asked to recant what he'd been teaching. Now, Martin Luther felt convicted that the church had drifted and he was trying to get the church back on track, and so his teaching was that this is not something you achieve on your own. This is something that is given to you by grace through faith. And so he's called before the Holy Roman Emperor, one of the most powerful men on the entire planet at the time, and said, basically, you need to take back what you've said or else. And Martin Luther went there knowing that there's a good chance that if I don't recant, I'm going to be executed for this, that my life ends at this appointment. And Martin Luther famously stood there before the Holy Roman Emperor and said, unless somebody can show me from Scripture that I'm wrong, I'm bound by my conscience. Here I stand, I can do nothing else. See, for Martin Luther, he could have said, you know what, God is going to continue to preserve his church, it's going to be fine, I just got to get out of here. Let's live to fight another day. And yet he was willing to say, no, I'm going to be part of the battle for God's word and his love. Because there are people who need to know that this is a victorious love that they can't achieve on their own, but it's been won for them. And God's going to do that with or without me. And so I'm going to take a stand, and if I die, so be it. Because I'm on God's side, and he is going to win. And if I die, he will raise me on the last day. So ultimately, when we look at John's letter here, the point that John's trying to get across is ultimately this, is that the love of Christ wins. No matter what opposition you face in life, whether it's external, forces of this world, the devil, whether it's internal, struggles with sin, doubt, right? Jesus' love wins. He conquers it all. And it's not just that he will win, he's already won. The fact that you believe, the fact that you can confess that Jesus is Lord is sign you are his people. And so what we do is we look to that victory and we look to him knowing I don't need to win on my own. This world can think of me as a loser, right? I can think of myself as a loser because God sees me as his victor in Jesus Christ. May we live in that victory. Amen.